Okay, Liz?
Yes,
good.
we're recording now.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see you all, or hear you all here today, shall we say? So 20 of us, good number, good turnout. First forum webinar of the year. So welcome to the Midlands Parks Forum webinar for those of you who are regulars and those of you who might be new. So we've got some various bits on the agenda today, but to introduce myself first, for those who don't know me, I'm James Diamond. I'm Vice Chair of the Midlands Forum and Parks Development Manager at Nottingham City Council, day job. And Liz, who's our chair, is also here. Liz, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Liz Stuffins, Chair of the Midlands Parks Forum, and I also work for Walsall Council. Sunish has just
Hello there.
Hi, Sunish.
Yeah.
So just to quickly cap on our agenda today. So first of all, we've got a presentation from Christina Hurst from Landscape Institute, all about their new entry standards and how they're supporting the sector through those.
Bye.
Nish, I'm just going to mute you if that's all right, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a chance for Q&A with Christina after that. And then after that, we've got Wayne here, Wayne Priestley from APPSI, who's going to talk to us about the sort of role of the Modern Parks Manager and how APPSI is supporting that with their training programme and what they've got on offer at the moment and coming up with, again, Q&A afterwards. And then after that, we've got some update from Chris Warman leading us off about hot topics and a potential roundtable discussion about any key hot topics that are coming out of the current COVID situation. In terms of the various lockdown rules that we're all in at the moment. And finally, as our sort of AOB for today, we've got a query from Richard Hunt in Leicestershire, focusing on bylaws, but we might have time for any other AOBs or to talk about other topics for next time. So to kick us off, if I can welcome Christina Hurst from the ADI to talk to us about entry standards. Christina, over to you, and if you just give me a shout when you want me to change the slide for you.
Well, thank you very much, James, and hello to everyone. I apologise for not actually having a video today. I'm afraid my connection is not up to the video, so we'll have slides and voice, and I hope that is sufficient for you all. But great to see so many of you joining the meeting. And just by way of introduction, obviously, you know my name now, Christina Hurst, and I'm the Entry Standards Consultant for the Landscape Institute. That role involves me in a number of things, particularly the development of the new competency framework that I'd like to talk to you about this afternoon and its links to membership. I'm also involved in the accreditation of courses for degrees, and I'm also involved in the apprenticeships and the development of the landscape apprenticeships, which I'd also like to talk to you about this afternoon. So I can see that I've got about half an hour or so on the agenda. I think I'm probably going to speak for less than that, so there'll be lots of opportunity for questions. And I'm more than happy if through the chair you'd like to pop anything into the chat. I can obviously then see those questions coming in. If James is happy, he's nodding, so I'm thinking he's happy. So please do, yes, just pop questions in as they come, because I can then pick those up when we get to the appropriate point. So if we could just move to the next slide, and I'll just explain to you what we'll be covering today. So I think we might have missed one slide there, James. If we could just pop back one, just with regards to a short program. Don't worry.
Yes. Right, sorry, there is one in there. Oh there is one, but it seems to have gone miss. That's very weird. Let me just start.
Don't worry, I can talk about it.
There you go. It's suddenly reappeared.
There we are. Okay. So yes, what I'd like to cover in the session today is I'd like to give you a bit of background to our entry standards project, what we've been doing, how we got really to where we are, to talk with you about the new competency framework, what that looks like, how we will use that for standards of entry to membership, and what that means to the parks profession and how that might be used for anyone involved in parks management to come through to membership. And I'd also like to spend some time talking about the apprenticeship opportunities and again what those might mean for the parks profession and for bringing new entrants and new skills into the profession. So if we could just move to the next slide, James, please. And really, this is just a little bit of background about the LI and about the work that we've been doing to, as I say, get us to where we are. So our mission as a professional body, as a member body, as you see here, to lead and inspire the profession to deliver for the benefit of people, place and nature for today and for future generations. And it's actually been, I guess, the last part of that sentence that's been very important to us in the development of the competency framework, making sure that what it is that we're putting together in terms of the knowledge and the skills requirements are fit for purpose, not only today, but for the future, and also for the increasingly diverse nature of the sector that we look after as a professional body. So we've been around quite some time now, founded back in 1929, and proud to say that we have over 5,700 chartered members, associate members and students. So we're by no means the largest professional body that exists, but we have, you know, a good number of members, the majority of which are based within the UK. We do have some and increasing numbers who are based internationally, but our focus really and our support for members is for those based in the UK. So in my next slide, I'd just like to explain to you some of the background that we've developed, and we can put all of the points here up actually, James. I can just talk through these. So we've done quite a lot of background. We obviously felt that we understood our sector well, but the nature of the sector has been changing so significantly, and we're looking after a much wider range of professionals than we've looked after previously. So we needed to do some background work, and we've actually been working on this since 2017. So it's been, you know, quite a lengthy process to get us to where we are. And that started, first of all, with an education review to look at the requirements and the expectations of employers who were both already in the sector and also potentially moving into the wider sector that we were, you know, beginning to look after. We also undertake a major piece of research called the State of Landscape, which was a survey with our members and with non-members and employers and others who kind of touched on the work of landscape to give us a picture really of what the skills, the knowledge and the behaviours would be going forward into the future. And that's been really important as the kind of bedrock and foundation then for the development of the competencies and the competency framework. We've developed a landscape management leadership forum, which includes parks professionals, increasingly so, and that helps us to ensure that we understand the needs and requirements of the practitioners working in landscape and parks management. And in fact, we had a meeting with that forum only earlier this week to update them on the work that we're doing and to get some input from them with regards to the implementation now of the competency framework. Back in 2017, we also had a working group, which we called the Routes to Licentiate Working Group. Our licentiate grade of membership has been subsequently reconstituted and renamed and is now associate. But that working group was looking at the different routes to membership and the changes that may be needed to reflect the increasing diversity of the sector. And the Entry Standards project that I'm managing and taking forward has been an absolutely key part of this background work. So that has been involved in looking at our routes to membership, our pathways, our designations, and the requirements that we have for membership. But as I say, both now and in the future. So importantly, and on the next slide, we just look at the kind of challenge that we face really with the diversity of the profession and the sector and its multidisciplinary nature. And I realise, of course, that I'm talking here particularly to a group of practitioners in parks management, but I think it's just important just to demonstrate the diversity of the sector that the Institute looks after. Traditionally, obviously dominated by the first of those, landscape architecture and design. And that, of course, continues to be a key part of our sector and ones that we continue, of course, to support and to look after. And linked to that, landscape planning and assessment, garden design, planting design and horticulture. But our membership base has dramatically increased in numbers in the other areas that you see here, particularly landscape management and parks management. Community engagement, we have a lot of members who are involved in community engagement, and in digital practice as well. And it's been really important for us to recognise the needs of that digital, the digital practitioners in our sector with regards to the slightly different, perhaps, areas of knowledge and skills that they would need. So really just to kind of emphasise the point that that it is diverse, but what we need to do and what we are absolutely making sure that we do is to look after all the individual elements of the sector to the same degree. So just turning to our next slide in terms of what we set out to achieve. And I think we've perhaps just skipped a slide actually, James, as well, but don't worry, I can talk to the slide previously. What we're looking to achieve through the Entry Standards project is to develop standards for entry that are fit for purpose now and in the future. We want to make sure that those entry processes are relevant, are flexible, and are easily administered. And it is really important that we develop a sort of central core, but that we also allow flexibility. We have 2 chartered designations that have been approved and recognised by Privy Council. And those 2 designations are that of Chartered Landscape Architect and Chartered Landscape Professional. And at this point in time, we intend to continue with those existing designations. But I would like to say that we have also looked at the opportunity to develop additional designations going forward. And that might be something that this group would be interested in discussing with regards to a particular designation, perhaps for parks professionals and parks managers. That's for the future. Any of you who've been involved in professional institutions previously will know how very long it can take to get something like that approved by Privy Council and established within the various regulations and bylaws that we operate within. And within the project, we want to make sure that we are transparent, that we have undertaken sufficient market research, which I've demonstrated to you with that previous slide where I've demonstrated the research that we've undertaken. And we, of course, want to be welcoming to all landscape disciplines, and we want to be inclusive and to encourage anyone who is touching on landscape, green space work, and the environment and rural areas to consider becoming a member. So if I move on now to the slide in front of us here to talk about the competency framework. So the circumstances prior to this is that we have a syllabus for our pathway to membership, and we have another document that supports the accreditation of courses. The problem for us really was that those documents really were very focused around the very traditional sector, that of landscape architecture and landscape design. So the intention of the competency framework is to allow us to expand our reach and to expand interest in membership. And the intention of the competency framework is to firstly describe the knowledge, the skills and experience that is required for someone to become a member at different levels of membership. And when we started out on this journey, we had 2 levels of membership that were important to this, which was that of chartered, of course, and also the associate member that I referred to earlier on, that is really for those who are studying on accredited programs. We are looking at that membership category at the moment to see whether that could be extended further. But since that time, we have now developed a new grade of membership, which is that of technician, and that has been approved by our membership and at an AGM and is now being rolled out and implemented. So the competency framework develops and defines the competency requirements for both chartered and technician membership. It reflects current practice and new areas of practice and is able to be sufficiently flexible that as new areas of practice come forward or practitioners tell us that perhaps there's things we haven't captured within the competency framework, we are able to include that as we move forward. So it's not static, it is capable of onwards progression and development. But we're very pleased that after all the foundation work that we've done and the engagement with members and beyond, that competency framework and the new criteria for membership were approved by our board in December last year. So hot off the press, we have now got a formally approved competency framework. So in the next slide, if I could just explain to you the purposes of the competency framework. What I've referred to already is obviously that of membership entry. So it establishes the standards of entry for membership and will be used as the syllabus and the benchmark for membership assessment. So anybody seeking membership will need to demonstrate the competencies that are relevant to the pathway that they choose to pursue. But of course, that's not the end of the use of the framework. Our intention is that it will also be used for continuing professional development, to help members to identify what their CPD needs are, but perhaps more importantly, to identify activities that are relevant to their particular development needs. And I know that, you know, many of you have been involved in discussions with my colleague Rob Pearce through the discussions with the professional development programme that is being developed. And there is a great opportunity of the development of a CPD programme that will be mapped to the competency framework and the relevant competencies. The other uses of the framework are to help our members to show the range of skills they possess, and in the fullness of time, it may be that we develop specific registers of practitioners who show expertness in particular areas of practice, and we can therefore help to promote and develop those, and for those members to promote their services or their businesses or their employers. We also will be using the framework to help us to recognise related professions and professional memberships, so that there may be opportunities for people to become members of more than one professional body without necessarily going through another assessment process to become a member of the LI. So lots of different uses for the framework, but the one that we're particularly focusing on at the moment in our work is its implementation with regards to standards of entry. So I'd just like to talk with you about what the competency framework looks like and how it will be applied to membership. So in the next slide, if I could just describe for you, firstly, how the framework has been structured. So it has, and apologies here, the slide I think has just slightly corrupted through one of the columns there. So the column should read professional competencies, core landscape competencies, and additional landscape competencies. And those are the three areas that the framework captures. Now, professional competencies are those skills and behaviours that are cross-professional, transferable between different professional institutions and between different professions. And I'll show you in a moment what I mean by those. But you would anticipate that they would be common, not only for the LI's different pathways, but the LI and other professional bodies. We've then developed core landscape competencies. And these are really important in that their intention is really to define the landscape and green space profession, in the sense that it is showing the skills, behaviours and knowledge that are unique to this profession. And anyone working to become a member would be required to achieve both the professional competencies and the core landscape competencies to some level. And the level will be defined regarding the type of membership that person is pursuing. So those are the areas that are kind of both defining the profession and defining professionalism. We then come to the flexibility that I've referred to earlier on, and the need to give opportunity for people to choose particular competencies that relate specifically to their experience, their knowledge and their work. And those are captured within the additional landscape competencies. And there is a fair amount of scope there with regards to what can be chosen. And I'll show you those in a moment, and we can obviously look at those with regards to the parks profession. So with the next slide, if we just talk about how this will be applied to membership. So the competency framework will, as I say, set standards of entry, as we know. It will also be used to form the basis for our degree accreditation. So where we do have a requirement for our degrees to be accredited, they will be expected to demonstrate how the degree is developing the knowledge for someone to start on the competency framework. They will be also the syllabus for the membership assessment. And there also will be the syllabus for the apprenticeship requirements, because those, although they're written in a slightly different way due to government requirements, have been mapped to the competency framework. And obviously our intention there is to make sure that we have consistent standards of entry, whether somebody is doing an apprenticeship or whether they're coming through a more kind of traditional route, they will be required to meet the same standards. Okay, so I'm going to just show you now the competencies in a kind of pyramid structure on the next slide. Now, this will look like a lot of words when you first see it. It'll also look quite small. So I do apologize. Hopefully you've all got some sort of Zoom that you'll be able to, I know we're not in Zoom here, sorry, we're in Teams, but we can zoom in so that you can actually take a look perhaps at the wording if it is a little small. But what you see here is the competency framework in its highest level, in the sense of just being the competencies that we've identified. But sitting beneath this is then the detail of what each of these competencies actually means. So you can see the different levels that I referred to: the professional competencies, common across all professions, the core landscape competencies, unique to our profession, and the additional landscape competencies, where we hope we capture the different fields of practice that our members and potential members would be involved with. Now, each of these competencies, when you drill down into the competency framework, is then defined in 4 levels. And they move from a level of understanding through an ability to do fairly straightforward tasks, through to being really working at a professional level, being accomplished and, you know, providing professional advice and making recommendations, through to an expert level, which is actually a level that is not required for initial membership, maybe something that in the fullness of time we use for registers, as I referred to earlier on, for people involved in particular areas of practice, and possibly also for fellowship. So I referred earlier on to the 2 pathways to chartered membership, that of landscape architecture, not so relevant, of course, to this conversation today, but the other, the chartered landscape professional, obviously, I hope would be relevant and of interest to this group. Now, as I said earlier, everyone seeking membership would need to achieve the professional and the core landscape competencies to some level. The levels are defined here. I won't spend too long talking about those, but in essence, what would then be required would be that anyone would be needing to choose 5 from the additional landscape competencies in the top part of this pyramid. Now, we've worked really closely with different parts of our sector, and I've worked with a number of parks managers, and I know I've spoken with a number of you on this call, in fact, with regards to what these additional competencies for parks management would be. And it, of course, is flexible, and it is, you know, very dependent upon an individual's work and experience. But some that I think would be of specific relevance perhaps would be contract management. You know, obviously those involved in parks management, very much involved in the management of contracts in various forms. Funding and finance, absolutely key, I know, to your work. Parks management, of course. Procurement and tendering. And then perhaps a choice from the remaining, possibly planting and horticulture, natural resources perhaps, and, you know, others that can obviously be more flexible to build in that last competency choice. But I would be interested to hear perhaps if anyone would like to share with me later on which competencies it is that they feel perhaps from that list would be relevant to you know, those actively involved in parks management. So those are the requirements for chartered membership, and the next slide then shows us technician. Now, this will look very similar, and it is very similar. The difference being that the same competencies are required, although there are a few that are lacking from professional competencies, but all the core landscape competencies still there, same additional landscape competencies, but the levels that would be required will clearly differ. Now, we anticipate that there may be 2 kind of types of potential technician member. Firstly, someone who may be working more in a kind of support role, you know, perhaps supporting someone more senior and therefore gaining quite a good range of experience, and therefore may be able to achieve more of the additional landscape competencies to the second type of candidate, who we think may be someone who's got particular expertise in maybe just one of those areas, and therefore would only be required to choose one of the additional competencies, but to a slightly higher level. So of course in here that could well be parks management being chosen to the level of, sort of accomplished, as I showed earlier on, and you can see at the top in the little blue box. So those are the that's the competency framework and how it looks. And as I say, kind of sitting beneath that is then quite a lot of detail with regards to what those look like. We are going to be developing guidance, and we're doing that actually as we speak, that will focus on the different fields of practice and what those competencies might look like for different fields of practice. And I'm really keen to hear from anybody who might be interested in being involved in that work to input to, if somebody is following, for example, the procurement and tendering competency with a parks management background, what kind of activities may they be involved with? And I think it's really important that we develop that kind of guidance and some kind of personas that really demonstrate that in practice. Okay, so that's what the competency framework looks like. And as I say, that is the one that is now approved by board and that we're now in the process of implementing. If I could just on the next slide, just say a little bit more with regards to the other areas that this will relate to. So as I said earlier on, the competency framework will also be used for CPD. We hope that will be useful to help members identify relevant activity, but also to be able to gain an idea of the level of that CPD activity, so that if a provider is running an event that they feel is relevant for the LI's CPD, that they can say, we think this is pitched at level A or B, and an individual will then be able to understand the level of knowledge that they would gain from attending that program. And again, it may be that if any of you are involved in provision of CPD activity, that might be a conversation you might be interested in having with us. As I said earlier, it will help us to identify members who can offer expert advice, and it will also help us to plan our CPD, because we'll be able to see where our members are choosing CPD. We'll be able to see the competencies that they're developing and the areas that are particularly being focused on, and we can then obviously develop additional CPD activity to capture those areas. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say with regards to pathways and routes to membership and the competency framework. I'd like to just turn my attention now to landscape apprenticeships and just share with you where we are with the apprenticeship programs, and then just to open up for questions after that. So if I may, if we could just turn to the next slide, please. So we have been working very closely with a group of employers. The development of apprenticeships has not been led by the Landscape Institute. It has been led by a group of employers who came together to say, we do need apprenticeships in this sector. There is a real need, and have now developed the programs, or maybe programs isn't the right term, but the standards and the requirements for those apprenticeships. And we've been supporting them in that work, and will obviously continue to do so. And we're also keen to make sure that the apprenticeships do lead to membership of the LI. So where we are with these, the first of the apprenticeships, the landscape technician, as it's called, level 3 apprenticeship, so sort of A-level equivalent and equivalent to the national certificates, and the BTEC programs that are run at level 3. This is fully approved by government and is up and running. The first apprenticeships will be starting in the spring, and the program will typically run over 2 years. It is flexible in terms of the fields of practice that it can capture, and it directly addresses those involved in what, the sort of landscape architecture, landscape design, but also in landscape management and parks management. And those roles are specifically identified within the landscape apprenticeship technician standard. So the the successful apprentice on this program will become a technician member of the LI. That is the outcome that any successful apprentice will achieve. And currently we are working with one provider, that is Capel Manor College, and they have prepared the program and are up and running, and that is an online program. So the fact that they are, maybe not immediately in the vicinity of an employer or an apprentice doesn't matter, because the apprentice is studying online. And the technician apprenticeship has been allocated a funding band of £9,000. So the training that is undertaken by the apprentice is fully funded. The only cost for taking on an apprentice is, of course, their salary, as it is with any apprenticeship. But we do hope and believe that this will be a great opportunity for employers to bring new blood into organisations and to develop new skills. And for ourselves, of course, to develop that technician grade of membership. So very happy to answer any questions on that and how it relates to parks management in just a moment. But if we just turn to the other apprenticeship, this is a higher level apprenticeship pitched at level 7, which is normally a master's level. It doesn't have to be. What we've said is that this leads to chartered membership of the LI, and therefore it is that chartered membership that is pitched at the level 7. So successful apprentices will become chartered members. It is expected that generally an apprentice will take an under and a postgraduate degree. They could just do one of those depending on their starting point. And we're working with a number of providers to make sure that there is provision of those programs across the sector. The apprenticeship has 3 pathways: landscape design, landscape and parks management, and landscape planning. So the individual apprentice will choose, and then there is obviously flexibility with regards to the knowledge and skills that they will need to demonstrate. Where we are with this, it's approved by government, but it is awaiting funding allocation. So we are currently in the process of providing quotes to government from our apprenticeship training providers, and that will then allow the funding band to be allocated. And we anticipate hearing on that in about the next 4 to 6 weeks. And we anticipate that this will be ready for delivery for September for the 2021 academic year. So I think it's exciting times with regards to, opportunities for people to join, young people and those perhaps already within the sector, to gain professional qualifications. And we've had great support for these. And I'm just on my next slide, just briefly wanted to show you that we have full support for the landscape apprenticeships from MHCLG, and Rishi Sunak, who was the Secretary of State at the time, has obviously written our letter there, and we also have the support letter as well from APPRENTICESHIPS. So thank you very much to those bodies for their support, and I just wanted to show you those because it really does demonstrate the support that we've had, not only from employers within the parks sector, but also from those key organisations. Okay, so just wrapping up. So what does the Entry Standards project mean for parks managers? Well, I hope it will allow greater access to membership. We have extended our reach with regards to the knowledge and skills that is required for membership. We hope that it allows us to reflect and cater for those working in parks management with regards to our CPD provision, and also the ability for someone to demonstrate CPD that has been undertaken with other providers. I hope it shows that there is opportunity for career progression through from technician, through associate, through to chartered member, and that we are offering an inclusive professional home to all of those who work within landscapes and within green spaces and parks. Our next steps, having now had full approval for the framework, just set out on the next slide. We are currently undergoing promotional work. We're developing our guidance for the different grades of membership and the related assessment processes. We are interested in hearing from anyone who might be interested in becoming an examiner. If that is something that interests you, please do let me know. And we are developing a new online assessment system, and we'll be moving on to review our accreditation system and our other membership grades in the summer of this year. So our intention will be that we will be running a pilot of the using the new competencies and the new assessment processes in spring for experienced routes, and then for more traditional routes to membership in autumn of this year. So exciting times, lots of times of change, but still a fair bit of work to go. We do feel we've made some quite significant progress, and I do hope you agree with that. And I'm very happy now to answer any questions that you may have, or to provide any further clarity that anyone might need. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christina. That's really interesting. Good to have a really thorough update on all the competencies. So if I can sort of hand it over to the floor, if anybody wants to raise their hand for a question or put a question in the chat, we can ask Christina to address any queries you've got or just any feedback. Liz?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. That was fantastic. Just to clarify about landscape management qualifications, I know particularly one of my members of staff is keen to use the apprenticeship levy to study for a degree, and keen to look at landscape management or landscape architecture. At the moment, he can only find landscape architecture qualifications available. So are you saying from autumn 21 there might be other colleges delivering a landscape management qualification through the apprenticeship levy?
The short answer to that, Liz, is yes. The longer answer is we're working very closely with two potential providers, neither of whom currently offer accredited degrees, but both are very interested in the landscape management and parks management provision. So they are doing a lot of development work, and they do anticipate that they will have a program that can be up and running for September. And you're absolutely right with regards to the funding of that. So what will happen then is that any organisation that is a levy payer, so obviously the councils or any other large organisation, will be able to use their apprenticeship levy to pay for the provision of that degree, because it forms part of the apprenticeship. And for the smaller organisations that aren't levy payers, they will be able to claim government funding that will equally pay for that. There may be a 5% contribution for some employers, but not for levy payers.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks both. Any other questions? Phil, just put a comment in the chat there about apprentices and needing new young blood in the sector. Good point, Phil.
Yes, and sorry to interrupt, but I agree with the point there. I mean, obviously, COVID has made things difficult. I appreciate that with regards to recruitment. Very much hope that it is possible to take on young apprentices. The providers will be able to help with regards to support for those young people. And I think the other thing to say is as well, not to forget that, of course, the apprenticeship, yes, it can be for young people. There are no age limits on the apprenticeship, and it can also be for people who are perhaps already working in the sector but actually don't have a qualification as yet and would be interested in the apprenticeship for that qualification.
Yeah, great. So Christina, you talked about some sort of marketing around this starting soon. Where should people go for more information then, if they do want to sort of look into it further?
Well, as always, our website, there'll be information there, and also our Choose Landscape website. Now, at the moment, that has not been used for the apprenticeships, but it will be. We're doing some work on that at the moment. So I would direct people particularly to the, just to our ordinary website just for the moment. But if anyone is interested in being involved in the development of any of the guidance, or perhaps coming forward as an examiner, please do encourage them to contact me direct. And I say that to all of you on this call. Please do contact me direct if that's of interest.
Great. Okay. And if anybody wants to get in touch, then they can come through us if they need your contact details, I'm sure. So brilliant.
Yes, Alison's got my details, and I'm more than happy, obviously, that those are given out.
Great. Thanks for that, Christina. Really appreciated. Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that item. So our next speaker, as mentioned, is Wayne Priestley from APPRENTICESHIPS, who is going to talk to us today about APPRENTICESHIPS and its role in kind of future parks management training and what they've got on offer and coming up. Wayne, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. Basically, I've been asked to come along today just to sort of give you an update as to where we are with some of the training. The training that I'm going to mention a little bit later on is very much been driven by members, to be honest, because what we were finding at a lot of the meetings we were attending and holding ourselves were that people were very sort of unsure as to what the role was expected of them in parks management. And if we just move to the next slide, it's a little bit of a gimmicky slide, but it perhaps gets over the message. There we go. One of the comments I got very early on at starting with APPRENTICESHIPS was actually at one of the Midlands Parks Forum, where one of the guys I sat next to said, look, I'm a parky person. I don't deal with business plans and community engagement and all this. And it is very much a sort of culture change from the gentleman on the left to what we sort of envisage now, expected of parks managers. The roles are growing more and more, and they're getting more involved in different sort of things. If we just show the next slide, which I'm sure people are fed up of seeing, but it does get the message over. The flower on the left there is what your traditional parks manager would have probably been expected to do maybe 10, 15 years ago. Now what we're looking at is almost like a field of responsibilities. They're looking at finance, external funding, grants, community engagements, developing friend groups, volunteer groups. They're expected to be business managers. They're looking at changing public needs, the way parks have to change their offer to people. All the new environmental requirements are coming in about climate change amelioration, about flood alleviation, strategy development, asset management, and now certainly through the pandemic, the promotion of the health and well-being. So the role of parks managers has absolutely mushroomed over the past 10, 15 years. What we're finding is some parks managers who've been in posts maybe 20, 30 years were struggling with some of this and saying, but I just don't have the understanding of what's required of me. So this is where the note came, if you like, that we needed to look more and more at the type of skills that were required, and was the training available to meet those needs. So we just move on to the next slide, please. What we did a couple of years ago, and we do it still through our advisory groups and seminars, is we actually got a focus group together to get people around the table and say, look, what is expected of your role? What do people want of you? And I've deliberately made that slide look busy because those were just a few of the things that were coming through from people. You can see there's a massive, massive list there of what people are expected to do. And I think what we have found is that no one person has got all those skills or even got half of those skills. A lot of people are well up on a lot of them. Every time, they go to the next meeting, they're suddenly embroiled in another requirement of a parks manager. And these meetings, we developed a report for MHCLG and the Parks Action Group, which APTI sits on, to actually show what the skill requirement was and how do we address that need, if you like. So if we move on to the next slide, what we tried to do was to break all these different skills and requirements you just saw on the previous slide into main groups or activities, if you like. So you can see there, we broke them to operational, environmental, public engagement, financial and commercial and strategic. And what we tried to show was that there are lots of different things that people need to sort of take into consideration. Now, some of these people may do just as their ordinary day job, but what they were saying was, well, to be fair, we're sort of spinning that many plates in the air. We don't know if we're doing these right. We're just sort of almost flying by the seat of our pants at times. I think parks managers have become far more savvy over the last 10 years. A lot of these things that you're looking at here are now becoming part of the day job. But it's new entrants, new people coming through, or people moving up the ladder, if you like, who are saying, well, yeah, we know these are expected of us, but we would feel much happier if we'd received some form of formal training on these. And as I say, this is the sort of thing that people sometimes can be a bit worried about moving up the ladder because of they don't have experience of these. So by offering the training, we're trying to give them that sort of, if you like, warm blanket that what they're doing is right and that, it's the sort of thing that they can cope with. If we move on to the next slide, please. What we tried to do is come up with the type of role you might find yourself in at some point during your parks career, and then look a little bit at the sort of skills that are required. So we've identified there everything from an apprentice trainee right the way up to a formal parks manager. And down the left-hand side there on the competencies, very much sort of in the same vein of thought of what Li was talking about there, which we have discussed with Li on some of these. Are what we can see as some of the key requirements at the different stages of your career. And I think that was an important point. And again, Li are on the same wavelength on that one. There has to be some sort of career progression for people to see, because we've got an aging workforce. I mean, we did a survey and found that the bulk of people now working in parks are well over 50. To me, that's very young, but it is an issue for us about bringing that new blood in, and we support the Li and their apprentice schemes on that one, because we need to sort of bring those skills in, but there are a wide variety of new skills that are required. Actually, that could be a positive for new entrants. It makes the job more interesting. It's not just about, you know, planting now or looking after the grass or whatever. There's all those other things that are required. I wasn't being flippant there. People do need to see that sort of differences in the job, you know, day-to-day differences, and what they might get involved in, and different career paths if they want to take them. It makes the career a bit more sexy, a bit more, ooh, that looks interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. So I think the training element is an important part of that, because it gives them that confidence that there is training there to help them through that career progression. So if we just move on to the next slide. Oh gosh, I don't know why people put those on. It all seems to sort of put a hold on it. But one of the things
that's the fanciest slide transition I've ever seen, Wayne, I think.
Is that pretty good? It's not mine, I hasten to add. Mine would have been just the next slide. But yeah, Fiona, our training officer, is very good at that sort of thing. Just as a point on that, and I mentioned about the training there, it's becoming increasingly important, particularly one that cropped up the other day. I was talking to a Northern authority, and they were saying, because of the pandemic and the pressure that there have been on parks, their elected members and the treasurer put more money into parks. What they're saying is, well, come on, let's get some things in the parks there. Let's get them more working for the people. But again, it's that need to sort of be able to stand back and say, whoa, hang on a minute, before we start whizzing this money at the parks, what do we actually want to do? What are the benefits it's going to bring? What have we already got in place, and can we afford to maintain it? And then, you know, what is it that people actually want? It may not be all about fancy new playgrounds and green gyms and whatever. It may just be about making the paths more accessible, making the place more pleasant to walk through, making it feel safer. So it is that sort of ability to have that holistic overview of strategy. And that's just one little strand of what's expected of a new parks manager. So I think there are lots of things going on there. So what we've tried to do is to take cognizance of all those things you saw on previous slides and develop training that we think will help. We're not looking to sort of create a chartered status, because obviously there are people like Li who are far better at that than what we are. What we want to try and do is meet the needs of our members who've identified these issues. Now, normally what we would do is we would hold a training session either at APPRENTICESHIPS or on site somewhere, but obviously that's not possible now. What we've started to do is to hold virtual classrooms. Again, we use Microsoft Teams. It's over a day or half a day. It's highly interactive. What we don't want to do is to sit there and just talk for a day. There are discussions, there are quizzes and polls, there's experienced trainers in there who are giving you the best case studies, examples of innovations. So we're actually trying to make them as interesting as possible, because we want to try and, as I say, meet the needs of people while still making it, an entertaining and interesting and worthwhile experience. Next slide, please. One of the first ones we've decided that actually got a lot of support from members was the introduction to parks management. Now, what this is aimed at is very much those sort of supervisors and operational managers who are considering moving up the career path, but are a bit wary about taking that step into management. It is quite a worrying time for people to suddenly be from, if you like, on the tools or on the pruners in this case, to move up to that management thing. What we're trying to do is to give them an idea of sort of key issues and principles of park management. So, as it says there, you know, what are the main pressures facing the industry today? What sort of things do you need to look at as a manager? You know, your leadership skills, your ability to listen, your empathy, your ability to understand sometimes quite complex situations. Also, you as a manager, you're going to have to look at the budgets and the resources you've got and balancing those two things. You know, can I put a new playground in, or would it be cheaper to upgrade an existing one? All those sort of decisions. You know, horticulture, can we afford high maintenance, high cost rose beds, or should we go for a more gentler approach, which may reduce some of the costs, but get, you know, biodiversity benefits? So it's looking at all those different things. And of course, before you make those decisions, you have to understand whether these things that you're thinking of will go down well with the users of the park. You know, you have to be able to listen to what the park user wants. And also, are there other partners involved in park? You know, council parks departments tend to run parks, but other people get so many benefits from them: the health people, the police, the social inclusion, the economic development, the climate change managers. All these people gain benefits from parks. So you need to pull them on board as well, and possibly bring some funding would be nice. But it's that sort of wider picture, wider vision that we're trying to sort of start to tease into potentially new managers. And one of the beauties of it is, at the end of the course, what we would hope is that you develop a personal action plan for your own development and improvement. So you would identify where your key strengths and abilities are, but then also identify where you've got room for improvement, or ways to sort of look at how you can make yourselves more attractive as a potential manager. You know, you will have to apply for those jobs. So it gives you that sort of confidence to go for those sorts of jobs, now that you understand a little bit more before you take that first step onto the management ladder. Next slide, please. Those are just a bit of advertising dates for the next introduction to parks management. Interestingly, just on that one, this council I spoke to yesterday, they were saying they're actually going to put some of their supervisors on this course, but they're also going to pay for someone from their health department and someone from their community engagement department to come along. Because what they're trying to do with the strategy is pull all the other strategies that have a relevance to a parks and green space strategy. By bringing people on who wouldn't perhaps normally come to this course, then they'll get a bigger picture and understanding when they're talking to parks managers and about the benefits they're receiving. Obviously, once you've sort of got into that management position, you may well be looking at a more senior role. And what you're looking at there is you're getting into the business planning and the commercial environment. How do I bring external funding in? How do I sort of new partners involved? How do I raise the profile of parks amongst the elected members and, you know, well-being board, for example? So it's taking a bit more of becoming more of a bit of a political and financial animal, as well as a horticultural expert. And the beauty of some of this as well is what we're finding is, because of the integration of services, people who might be a waste manager are suddenly being given parks to deal with. And as a consequence, what can happen sometimes is the focus stays on the waste and the parks take the hit. And what we're trying to do is to get that sort of understanding about the importance of parks and the multiple benefits that they have. And, you know, they're not something that are just a cash cow that you can draw money off for, because, you know, emptying bins is a statutory duty and parks aren't. So therefore, you know, if we're going to make savings anywhere, it'll be in the parks. We need to get them to understand better the value of parks to the community and wider partners. So it is about things like income generation, you know, looking at traditional sources, which is the council budgets, but also blue sky thinking about getting, you know, what we're finding now is some parks are being created as business units in themselves to actually generate their own income. And there's some wonderful examples in the Midlands there, and Phil from Birmingham will tell me all about those. And, you know, yourself, James, at Nottingham, excellent examples of generating income. But also it's starting to look at bigger things like, you know, the wider value of parks and biophilic cities. Phil and Nick will know very well on those sort of things. But parks now are being seen far more than just somewhere you go for a walk. The benefits are sort of innumerable, and people need to be starting pushing that forward. And it's this understanding, this wider understanding, that things like this one can help. Next slide, please. Again, those are dates there for the event, so I'll leave those because they'll be with you again. What we're also finding is within the training for members, it's not always just about general parks management. We're getting asked for niche training, such as managing allotments. So we recently held an allotment seminar. We had nearly 100 attendees at that, which is, for a relatively small service area, is incredibly large, really. And it's because of the fact that people are taking more interest in where the food comes from. Food miles, you know, environmental impact, community engagement, social inclusion, intergenerational sort of working together. There's all these different things that are coming out on that. And also communities want to have some empowerment and run their own allotment. So dealing with all those multiple requests and requirements is something else that members have asked for. Sometimes it's not just on general parks, it's on things like, you know, simple but quite complicated services at the same time that allotments can be. And anybody who's managed an allotment, you know, it's very difficult sometimes to tell an allotment holder that you're going to put the price up by 3%. It may only be pence, but to them, you think you were taking the living off them. Because I've managed allotments, and you can find it quite a difficult service to manage sometimes. So I think by providing these very niche sort of training as well, we are looking at trying to address the issues that members have been asking of us. And I would make that point again. All this training is very much APPSI member driven. It's not a group of people like me sat in the office going, oh, I know, what about a training course on allotments? These have all been asked for. And a lot of the course content is suggested by members themselves. And the people who deliver these courses are all practitioners as well. We don't just sort of have anyone delivering these courses. Most people who deliver them have got 10, 20, 30 years experience. So they know what they're talking about. So if we do provide a course, we make sure it's relevant first. And I would mention most of these courses now are about to be CPD'd. In the case of the Introduction to Parks Management, I think that is CPD'd already. So we are looking at the value of not only coming on these courses and getting the best practice and innovation, but also the value from a point of view of career progression. So the CPD element is important, and we recognise that, and we're actually now pushing that forward. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, again, those are the dates for that, and there's the collapsing. I'm actually, today, I am Matthew, I am Fiona Sutton-Wilson, head of APPSI training, doing this presentation. It isn't me, really. But just to sort of, if there are any queries or anything you want to know about, Fiona is the contact at APPSI. I'll try and answer as many questions or as few questions as there are, but if you want to know more depth about the courses, contact Fiona at APPSI. She'd be more than happy to speak to you. And I would say sometimes we can do courses that are tailored just to your local authority, which is sometimes very helpful for people. So I'm open to any questions if there are.
Brilliant, that's great. Thanks, Wayne. Really appreciate that. Good update there on kind of the breadth of stuff that's being offered. Just Liz, if I bring you in and also perhaps put up this slide, perhaps if you want to cover that.
Yeah, sure. Yes, Wayne, thank you ever so much for that. And thank you for plugging the 2 courses that we're running with you on the 27th of January and the 3rd and 4th of February. So we've still got places available on those. So we've used our lottery funding to pay APPRENTICESHIPS to run these courses for us. So if you're interested in coming along, then please get in touch with Alison. That will be great. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Wayne, was you talked a bit about CPD, particularly for the was it the allotments course? It was the introduction.
We're going to get them all CPD. One of them already is CPD, and the other 2 will be hopefully by the end of February.
So, in terms of if you were doing one of the the LI routes to chartership, would that CPD qualify for a Landscape Institute chartership? Are you working with a Landscape Institute in that way?
I would say, based on the comments that Lynn gave, then I think that's something we need to be speaking to them about, to be honest, because I think there's obviously synergy there, and it would be a shame to miss that. I mean, Fiona, I did drop her a note saying, look, CPD, I'll bet one of the questions comes up that says, what can you use these for? Unfortunately, she hasn't got back to me, but I will chase that one up for you.
Great, thanks, Wayne.
Great, and Phil's just left a comment in the chat there about having APPRENTICESHIP courses that complement other courses as well. So I guess there's that mix available really for the sector from different sources.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if anybody within the group does sort of think of anything where they think actually it would have been nice to have a course about X, please speak to us. We can sort of devise courses that working with members that will meet the need. If they say, "Oh, I have a lot of staff who don't understand why," then we can create a course to help them understand that.
Yeah, and I think as Sanisha said in those slides, it just, just one slide just demonstrates, doesn't it, in that long list of all the different things that we cover, as well as the LI and the new LI competency framework, just how many different elements to a kind of park manager in inverted commas there are now that we could potentially try and, provide training on via different means.
Yeah, I basically ran out of space on that slide. There was a lot more.
Yeah, Joe. The slides. So the whole the meeting's been recorded, so the presentation will be available in about a week's time on the Midlands Forum website. But I'm sure if people want copies of individual slides, I'm sure we can, or presentations, we can share them separately as well. If you drop us a mail, that's not a problem. So great. So unless there's any other questions from anyone, then thank you very much, Wayne. Much appreciated for your time on that. So our next item is a bit of a sort of COVID-19 regular update, really. So Chris hopefully is in the room. I'm going to stop showing for a minute. Chris, perhaps it'd be nice to see a couple of faces. I'll turn my video on, perhaps you do the same. And then just to update us on what the situation is with the latest lockdown and parks at the moment, COVID-19 situation.
Yeah, that's fine. Welcome to Lockdown 3, the worst of all 3 films. But there you go. It feels like a really bad sequel to Nightmare. But anyway, really just open to the floor in terms of any particular issues that are out there at the moment that I can feed back to government. But while people are thinking of those issues and put in the chat or whatever, just some updates in terms of what information is out there to help us. The best information, to be fair, is on the Sport England coronavirus Q&As. That covers things like play, skate, sports bookings, volunteering. It's a really useful type of guidance for us all. Sorry, I'm reading the chat, sorry. And I'll put the link in the chat moment for that. On top of that, government have updated their green space guidance recently, particularly around play. And I'll be very professional with this, so don't worry. But I will just tell you what they've put. I'll leave it at that. So that their new guidance on play, bearing in mind some authorities are closing play areas because they can't cope with the numbers, and there's a big campaign against that for obvious reasons, and the benefits of play and the level of risk outdoors